everyone always asks, do you feel like there's a straight path to success? And I feel like no, if you don't squiggle a little bit, you might not really be experiencing all the things you need to. So there's definitely things I did not like, but that experience helped me kind of find my way to where I am now, where I'm like, okay, I know I don't.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Connect Over Coffee. Joining us today is Danielle Berman, who is the founder and CEO of Tackle What's Next.
Thanks for joining us today, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Super meta moment. It's going to feel like I'm talking in third person today, Danielle, but definitely excited to have you on our show today. So let's kick things off with our 2-minute drill, just to get us warmed up in that question answering here. We're just going to ask rapid fire a few questions at you and just answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Here we go.
All right.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
All right.
Favorite athlete?
Oh, this is a tough one. I would say right now, Renee Montgomery.
Ooh.
All right. I like that choice. Favorite sports movie?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think one of my favorites is Remember the Titans. It's my dad's favorite. We watched it so much. So that's got to be the one that jumps to my mind first.
All right.
Awesome.
Team Samsung or Team Apple?
Apple, all the way.
Danielle doesn't love that question or love that answer. All right. Go to sports live or watch on TV?
Oh, go to live. I love live.
All right. And then MJ or Kobe?
I'm going to have to go MJ, though it is tough, but I am engaged to a Bulls fan, so I think I would be in trouble if I did not pick MJ.
That's fair.
And then finally, what would your walkout song be, or the song that gets you hyped every time you hear it?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. Big fan of the party rock anthem. That's a really fun one that just like no matter what mood I'm in, I am happy when I listen to that song and ready to do whatever I was supposed to do. I'll put it on in the morning before I get to work sometimes just to pump me up.
I like it. LMFAO. They have
exactly.
That got me through some college days for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I heard it. Exactly.
All right, now that we're all warmed up, let's jump into it. So a lot of our audience, our demographics, they're former athletes, former collegiate athletes, and sometimes even just like Jen and myself when we were collegiate athletes, we weren't sure what our next move would be after, we hang up the racket, we put the ball back on the rack there. What's our next move? And your organization provides resources for that career transition. Can you talk a little bit more about what you are doing through Tackle What's Next?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously that's exactly what we're trying to solve is fill some gaps between some of the resources that may be available or might not be as easy to access for folks around that next chapter. Our mission is to change the narrative around life after sports. So we're really about storytelling, sharing perspectives, best practices from fellow athletes, really talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, about that transition time, what worked really well, what did they wish they would have done. And our goal is to inspire athletes of today to really start to think about that now, as soon as possible and start preparing. So we're really trying to take more of a proactive approach versus now that you've transitioned out, like, here's what you need to do. We're trying to talk to current athletes and athletes that are coming up in the system of college and professional sports. We're really trying to tell them, like, what else are you interested in? What else are you doing? Who else are you talking to? So that's our kind of short and sweet goal, is to really change that narrative and help people feel like they can involve themselves in something other than their sport.
Yeah. And do you feel, just to piggyback off that question, do you feel like, nowadays the current collegiate athlete, the current professional athlete does kind of have that business focus where they are really preparing and thinking about what is next?
Yeah, I think a lot more than they used to. And I think you mentioned a guy that really started a lot of it, which is a Kobe Bryant, someone like him. The LeBron Jameses, you see someone like Renee Montgomery who's owning a team now, right? There's so many athletes that are thinking so much bigger than the game itself and really going above and beyond. And I think they're setting the example that it's cool to invest. It's cool to start a business. It's cool to have something on the side that's not sports related or that you've made through connections of sport. I will say though that you see a lot of it happening with athletes that have quote unquote made it, right? They're probably not getting cut anytime soon. They might age out of the sport, but they kind of set their own terms. And so one thing we're really trying to reach is those folks that maybe aren't a household name. They don't necessarily have millions of dollars in their bank account where they can try a lot of things out. They're graduating or retiring from professional sports, maybe not their choice. And so we don't see that happening as much in those types of athletes and those athletes that are still grinding to make teams, that are still grinding to, get that starting position. A lot of athletes still feel like their sole focus has to be athletics to make it. Yeah. They're not wrong, but I think one thing we found is there's a lot of pressure that goes into that and a lot of burnout that can happen. And when that's taken away from you, it can be really dangerous to your mental health because now you don't have anything else to do that you feel comfortable or valuable or valued at doing, I should say. So I think, yes, the public persona is changing, but I think we still kind of have that's like the tip of the iceberg. And I think we need to kind of keep digging, lower and lower to keep athletes thinking about how important this is, whether you're going to be a billionaire or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So I kind of want to take it back to some of your previous roles.
Sure.
You were in marketing and public relations, an assistant editor for Extra Point Sports Magazine, and an SEO manager and content writer. So kind of in that marketing and content writing PR world. So I want to know, if at all, did these positions play a role in what you're doing now? And did you have a vision for where you wanted your career to be and a path to get there?
Yeah, it's such a good question because you probably look at it and you're like, whoa, why is she working in sports with athletes, transitioning out? That was not necessarily always my passion, but to answer your first question, absolutely. I think the power of storytelling, the opportunity to tell stories and share perspectives and see that impact, whether it's digitally or at an event in person, I think that stuck with me from those experiences of just having conversations or creating content that actually changes and makes people think differently. And so, yes, I think absolutely that had a huge impact on what I'm doing today and why content is such a big part of what we do at Tackle What's Next. But yeah, I like to call my career path a squiggle. It was definitely not a straight line. There was no rhyme or reason to it. If you ask my parents, my senior year of college, I'm I was going to go work for this former athlete. He started his own nonprofit and this business, and I'm moving to Minnesota. And my parents were like, no, you're not doing that. We just paid for a degree, all these things, you just finished your degree. What is going on here? We need you to do a stable job where you get a 401k and all of these things. And my idealist mind was no, I'm going to go change the world. Right. So I think my path just really was me trying to find where could I make impact? Where could I find a fit? And eventually I realized I knew I wanted to work in sports, but I didn't see this impact that I could make on a big team or in a big organization. And I thought, well, I'll just do this on the side. So I started consulting and I started doing things. So everything just kind of squiggles, as I like to say, because there was no I want to do this. And at 22, I was here's how I'm going to do it. It was me just kind of trying things and being oh, this is cool. I love this aspect. And then meeting people and they're hey, you should work here. And oh, this sounds great. Let's go over here. And then either I liked it or I didn't like it. And then I found something else. So everyone always asks, do you feel there's a straight path to success? And I feel no, if you don't squiggle a little bit, you might not really be experiencing all the things you need to. So there's definitely things I did not like, but that experience helped me kind of find my way to where I am now, where I'm okay, I know I don't want to do that. So let's come back this way. So yeah, it's certainly not a straight line, but I will say the reason I am where I am is because of the people that I know and the people I was able to keep in touch with. And so that's always my biggest advice to people is keep connections, maintain them, be genuinely happy to help people and support people. And when you're looking for that next move, they're there to say, hey, I know this person or I know this position. So that's really how I got started with what I'm doing is the relationships that were oh, I love this idea. Here's someone you should talk to. And that's really how it started.
Yeah, absolutely. So you basically just answered the next question I had for you, kind of like how networking played a role into you starting Tackle What's Next or becoming a consultant. So
Yeah.
just keep those connections. I think that's something that a lot of these chats are providing, is just make sure you keep and build relationships.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing is like the follow-up is the biggest thing people don't remember to do, right? You go to a conference, you meet someone and you like send that email like, great to meet you, look forward to staying in touch. But like if you don't actually stay in touch, that's when you lose that relationship. And so I am that person that sporadically, like a couple months later, I'm like, hey Danielle, hey Jen, like how are you guys doing? Like we should catch up soon. How's it going? I saw you guys are doing this. So I am that person that'll send an email that's like saying hello, like just checking in. And I don't really care how fast you respond, but for me, it's like I want to keep in touch with you and I want to see how things are going. And so I do think that's like the number one reason people don't maintain their connections is because they just simply forget or like are too busy to follow up. And so I build it into like my calendar, like, okay, who have I not talked to in a while that I need to reconnect with? And some people beat me to it, which is great. I love seeing when people are like, hey, Danielle, it's been a while. I'm like, yes, all right, a fellow follow-upper.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's just about, you obviously make the networks, you make the connections, but then how do you activate and stay constant and relevant with them? So I think that was a great, perfect example. Just sending those random updates. How's everything going? Here's what I've been up to. That is something very important with when you're networking, especially in your business and our business as well, keeping those relationships intact. Yeah. So
100%.
Yeah. One question I did have is, where does the passion come from? Where did the passion come for you to create this company and working with athletes and collegiate athletes and how they're transitioning out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, I worked in college at the athletic department at Syracuse, which is where I went to school. And I was a tutor there, and I worked as a manager of the men's soccer team for a couple of years, and I was just working in their communications department. And I think the one thing I just stuck with me is like how much stuff student athletes have to do. I was like a traditional college student, like I was getting paid to tutor at the athletic department. Like I was there because it was a job I had. I wasn't there because I had mandatory study hours or I had, you know, tutoring or all these things that I had to do on top of practice, on top of traveling to games, on top of class and studying for tests. So I think that stuck with me. And, you know, being in sport management, I think a lot of people are focused on like the marketing and the legal and being an agent or doing all these crazy things. And for me, I was like, man, this is what happens to them. Like that was always like something that stuck in my mind. I don't think that I realized the impact it had on me until I started working with a former athlete and his company. And then I started to think like, I wonder what happened to the soccer player that I tutored in college. Like, where did she go? Like, what happened? What job is she in now? Or like, I wonder what happened to the basketball guy that I tutored who was, you know, on the bench. Like, I wonder if he ended up playing internationally. You know, like those kinds of things you think about, and they stuck with me. And so when I was working with a former pro athlete, he had a lot of teammates that played a lot longer than he did, were way more successful in the field, but yet did not know what their next move was going to be. And were coming to me to say, hey, you've had jobs before. Like, what do I do? How do I do this? And I thought like, well, that can't be right. Like me, 25-year-old me, like first job out of school, like I don't know enough to be directing you how to live the rest of your life. And so I think I thought back to all these things and I was just like, there's no room to explore who you are as an athlete. Sometimes you are just following the game plan. And for me, I saw like the after effects of that. If you follow the game plan successfully, you can still retire and have this like gap in your life. And I just thought that can't be right. Like that can't be normal for someone who's made it to the highest of high levels and now has to like kind of go back to the bottom and be like, all right, like, see you guys. Thanks for everything. I'll come back to the reunion event in a couple of years, you know, like it's, to me, it's just like there has to be more resources. So I think that's just like the personal stories that I saw and the people that I met. I was just like, it's not fair to them. And they were really adamant about what can we do, you know, and I think to see the passion and the dedication athletes put into this, like if every athlete had a passion of something else they were going to do after they retired or after they graduated, we'd have so many driven people in the workforce doing incredible things. And so that's really what keeps me going is like, we are letting all these motivated people and talented people struggle when they leave. And we're missing all of these opportunities to prepare them for whatever they want to do. And so I think that's where it comes from. It's just the personal stories and people I met and experiences I've seen secondhand just through them struggling and asking for help. it's hard to ask for help, but I think that's what stuck with me is that people wanted resources and they didn't know where to go. So that's really where I decided, you know what, I'll do what I can to help give them a sounding board or a place to at least click on and feel like they are in a safe space that they can ask questions and, look at what they want to do.
Yeah. And I can relate to that. It's hard to ask for help when you're the one who's been at the top of your game for a long time. And people are coming for you for how do I get better in this particular sport? How do I do this and that? So, I was a collegiate athlete myself, and then Jen played collegiately as well. And, that was probably one of my biggest struggles when I graduated, is going into the workforce a little bit and having to ask, how do I do certain things? Like, usually in college, right, especially at some bigger schools, this was all set up for me. My schedule was already done. I had dedicated practice, dedicated training, and now I'm in the workforce and it's all on you to create that schedule. So that was definitely a big transition for me. And how do I go about maintaining everything where it's not given to you no more, and B, you're not the number one person anymore either. So
you're in the bigger C, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
That's definitely it's definitely stories that I'm sure we could probably all share together what's happened in that transition, what that looked like. But getting back to the conversation here, throughout your career or anything, have you ever come to a moment of a fork in the road where maybe you decided to stay on path because that felt comfortable and safe, but then you decided to maybe veer off and take another less travel road because it's a new opportunity or a new experience for you?
Yeah, I feel like that is the kind of story of my whole professional career. Is there's always been kind of the safe opportunity or the thing that, people tell you should do, or like, this is what's expected of you if you get to this point, right? And then for me, there's always this like other opportunity that was really cool, but like not guaranteed or a little bit risky. And I have been lucky enough to have the opportunity and to be able to have access to take those risks. And so I understand that that's something that I can't take for granted, is that I had a family that was like, great, okay, we don't necessarily agree with your decision, but we're supporting you. And for some reason, if you go broke, we have a couch for you to sleep on until you figure it out. So I was able to take those risks a lot safer than I know other people have those, don't have that luxury. And so I took advantage of that. I took a lot of risks. I took jobs that I was like, no idea what I'm going to be doing, but this sounds cool and I'm ready to dive in. But I think the fork in the road is such a great way to put it, because even with starting Tackle What's Next, there's consulting work I'm still doing on the side. And so I have a lot of mini forks in the road now. Do I take on this client, or do I dive more into Tackle What's Next and what we're doing? And so I do think you have to have those conversations with yourself a lot of like, okay, let's lay out the pros and cons. Let's lay out like what money and budgets, like all those things are so important. But you kind of have to know who you are and where you want to go to be able to answer those questions the right way. And so I think that's the hardest part, is like, sometimes you know what you need to do and you just want to kind of keep telling yourself, no, we could do this, or we could do this thing. But I think at a certain point, like, you can take enough risks, but you also need to make sure you're taking care of yourself and you're not just trying to push your career forward for somebody else's expectations or for whatever you think you should be doing. So I think that's something I've learned a lot is, titles are cool, right? Everybody wants that cool job or that snazzy title, but if you're not happy in that job, it doesn't matter how cool the title is. You need to make sure you're in a position that you're okay and you feel like you have the resources you need. So that's a lesson I've learned, I think, the hard way. But that fork in the road is definitely something people should take seriously, because I won't say there's a wrong decision, but you have to make sure you know where you want to go, because if it's not taking you there, then it might not be the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've shared, like, that's great advice, because I feel like everybody comes to a fork in the road and they're just like, oh, what do I do? And it can be that you're going to have to make the harder decision, but in the long run, it'll have so much more value and benefit to you than taking the easy road. So along with all this advice you've given so far, do you have any tips or habits that you've done or still do just to keep yourself and put yourself in the best position in order to exceed and take that next step in your career?
Yeah, I think habits to me are great. I find myself getting addicted to setting habits, so I have to like kind of limit how many like self-help and habit stuff I'm going to implement. But I think for me, the biggest things for me are, and I've been slacking a little bit on this lately, so I need to get back at it, is making sure I'm moving and exercising. To me, that is a great way for me to relieve stress. And so some weeks are better than others. I won't say I work out like every morning at 6 a.m. and it's amazing. But I definitely try to do something. And I know on the days that I don't, especially I've been traveling a lot recently. And so I know on the days that I don't, I definitely don't feel the same energy that I do on days that I at least go for a walk or like get a jog in or do a hit workout, whatever it is. So that's something that I feel like just I get a lot of stress out from that. So find something that will take some of the stress and anxiety out of your day right at the beginning of the day so you can kind of go and refresh and relax. But I think for me, like some of the biggest habits I have are just like routine. Like I don't want to have the same day every day. My job's lucky enough that I don't, but like I start work around the same time every day. I try to like eat dinner. Like I try not to work too late every day. Sometimes it's not possible. I have to work a little later some days, but I try to give myself consistency, especially in a job like mine. I could be working all day, every day, and there's no one there to be like, oh, Danielle, it's time to go home. And so I think for me, I have to set boundaries for myself. And so that's been a habit I've been trying to continue is to be like, oh no, I'm not available after 6 o'clock tonight. How about we find a time next week? Or hey, this event we have to push to a different day. Like I'm not available that day. So I think the biggest habit I've been trying to learn is prioritizing myself and what I need to get done, what I need to do, and then like what else doesn't need to get done can be pushed. It's not urgent. Other people's priorities aren't necessarily urgent. So that's a habit I've been trying to build with myself is like seeing what I need to do and then worrying about what other people need from me, which is easier said than done, but it's something I'm trying to work on.
All right. And then finally, Danielle, we've made it to our last question of this chat here. Last question is, we like to call it around here, the shit you wish you knew, which loosely translates to, and I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, but one piece of advice you wish you could tell your younger self or someone just starting out in this sports and entertainment entrepreneur business here.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I kind of touched on it earlier, but like do what you want to do and not what you think people are telling you to do or what expected of you. I think I fell in that trap very early on of like, I need to be doing something that everyone's going to be like, whoa, like, what is that? Tell me more. And I definitely stepped away from that. And I had a lot of time where I didn't work at a job where people were like, whoa, what do you do? And what's how cool? And I think that's really important not to get bogged down in like expectations or like what you should be doing, because ultimately you need to do something that's going to get you excited and energize you. And that might not be the same thing of like the traditional path. So that's the biggest piece of advice I would give is like worry about yourself. Don't worry about what your friends are doing. Don't worry about what, your professors are telling you the next step is. Like figure out who you are, what you actually want and where you actually want to go. And most importantly, like follow your strengths. Because I think a lot of people don't do that. They try to like find this perfect ideal passion job that's going to like light them up every day. And even tackle what's next is not fun every day. Like there's stuff I have to do that I'm like, this is horrible, but I still have to do it. And so I think if people are going in, and I know I was at 18, 19, like I'm going to find my dream job and I'm never going to work a day in my life. Like that is not true. At everything you do, there'll be days that you don't like it and it will be work, but that's okay if you are good at it and you know what you're doing. So I think really emphasizing your strengths and finding a job that you can do that. Your passions can come in your volunteer work or in things you do outside of work for a while. Once you become an expert, then you can start to do stuff with your passion and your strengths. So that's the big thing I think I've learned.
Yeah, that's awesome. It goes back to the theme of prioritizing yourself, right?
Yeah. 100%. Exactly. I'm always trying to follow the advice that I'm giving people through Tackle What's Next or that Tackle What's Next people are giving. So I feel like every time we do an event or a conversation, I'm like learning from the athletes we interview. And I'm like, that is great. I am going to write that down. I like that. So I'm lucky that I get to learn from amazing people every day. So I'm trying to, it's harder to listen to yourself or what people are telling you, so when someone else says it, I'm like, oh, maybe I should do that too. That sounds great.
same, half of these chats, I find new things
Yeah.
to write down.
Exactly.
So.
I bet. Oh my gosh. I'm sure with all the amazing people you guys are interviewing, you hear a lot of great tips.
Yep, that's exactly why we asked this question, because we have what we wish we knew when we were younger, but
Yeah.
just learning from other people helps us grow and keep sharing the information with everybody else. But so like Danielle said, that was our last question, and this was a great chat. So thank you so much, Danielle, for taking the time today.
Oh, of course. Thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. So if you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button below. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, LinkedIn, and look forward to connecting soon.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.